In this video, I'll debunk the new Eating Our Way to Extinction documentary that launched just a few days ago. Or maybe a few weeks, or a few months. But still quite new, right? So if you're thinking about watching the documentary, then here's a few things that you need to keep top of mind. And if you have already watched the documentary, then here's a few points that you might have missed. By the way, for those that are new here, I'm Florian, ethical vegan for 7 years, and founder and coach of fitvegans.com, the most results-oriented vegan fitness coaching service. So let's just dive right in. The biggest point that the documentary is trying to bring across is the effect on animal agriculture on the climate. So quite similar to Cowspiracy. And the reason the documentary wants to show the link between animal agriculture and the climate is because there's truly a big link between those two. So animal agriculture is responsible for a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, uses a massive amount of land, is responsible for 90% of the fires in the Amazon rainforest, and if that wouldn't be enough, it also requires a massive amount of water. One of the things that absolutely just blew my mind is the fact in the documentary that switching globally to a plant-based diet would reduce the amount of land required by 3.1 billion hectares, which is equal to the size of the African continent. What? By hearing these numbers and these facts, it's normal that one gets outraged, right? One wonders, if things are so bad, why isn't the government doing anything? And I get it, all documentaries are structured in that way because polarization, us against them, always sells. And the documentary is trying to sell you something or persuade you into going vegan, which by the way is a quite noble pursuit and you should definitely go vegan. But the polarization is only one side of the coin, and if you're already vegan, meaning you've already seen the benefits and got motivated enough to go vegan, then you must understand the other side of the coin. And that is where the debunking starts. But before we go into the debunking, here's a quick checklist for you to keep top of mind. So first, watch the documentary because it's actually quite good. Number 2, go vegan. And then number 3, understand the other side of the coin so you become an effective vegan because you have an empathetic understanding of the other side of the coin. So instead of being a vegan full of resentment, you understand why things are the way they are. And it's also important to note that I outline these reasons not because I sympathize with the governments or the other side, but I empathize. And there's a big difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is feeling with the other person, and empathy is understanding the other person. There's a big difference there. A doctor feels empathy for the patient's situation. But if the doctor would feel sympathy for the patient's situation, that wouldn't allow him or her to do their job properly. Am I right? And we, as effective vegans, should definitely be able to empathize with the other side if you're looking to persuade them in the best possible way. Because if you're looking to teach and lecture people, make sure they understand you. But if you're looking to change and persuade people, make sure people feel understood. I let that sink in for a while. Anyway, where were we? Alright, so the other side of the coin and why governments or the other people in the documentary, the enemies in the documentary, act the way that they do. So let's just dive right in. The first reason is industry. That's the first point I want to get across, and that is one of the reasons why the status quo is currently the way it is and why we have that much force on the status quo. Because animal agriculture is not unlike the oil industry, right? Because it makes up a significant percentage of the GDP of a country, especially of select countries such as Brazil. Because Brazil derives a big percentage of their GDP, between 5 to 10%, from animal agriculture alone and the export of beef. Now, why is the GDP important for a country? So most people think, oh, if the GDP drops, then it doesn't matter at all. No, there are actually quite significant consequences if the GDP drops of a country. I will highlight both the individual and the governmental consequences or countrywide consequences. For the individual, the total decrease of the GDP doesn't just mean that very rich people have less money. Very rich people will have less money, but also the average folk will have less money as well, meaning less buying power. So average people will be able to spend less on the things that they would actually like to spend. So their standards of living will decrease. What also goes along with that, which is point number 2 for the individual, is decreased job security. So there will be more unemployment in the country, which along with a decreased standard of living can increase the potential of violence in the country. On the government level, a smaller GDP means a less competitive country and overall a less strong country. And that is a country that can invest less in education, specifically STEM, so science, technology, engineering and math, and in the military, which are crucially important when it comes to global competition, unfortunately. So economic decline of a country, so decline of the GDP, often leads to more violence, which is something a very iconic thinker and a big role model, I would say, of mine, Peter Thiel, highlights over and over again in his lectures and in his interviews. I leave a link to one of his quite interesting interviews in the description below. The second reason why we have the status quo and to understand the other side of the coin is that we need to understand people. So a very good book that I've read a few years ago is called The Dictator's Handbook. And that is a very funny title, I know, but it has a very profound message. And that is, if you understand people, you understand governments. Because governments are made up of people. Because most people have this false belief that governments are just these faceless entities or these, people in tie that have no human emotions. And nothing could be further from the truth. The decision makers in the government are similar to you and me. They have fears, worries and desires similar to you and me. They're guided by their prevailing habits similar to you and me. And they're guided by egocentric interests, again, similar to you and me. So if government decision makers are meat eaters, which they are based on the law of averages, right? Because vegans are still quite a small amount of the population, then they will favor laws that are more inclined to go along with their pre-existing habits and with their egocentric interests, right? That's why government decision makers often don't see the side of vegans because they're not vegans themselves. So that is the other side of the coin. So where does that leave us? So on one side, we have billions of animals that die each year because of our animal farming practices, which is, to say the least, just completely wrong. And we certainly should be looking to change that. Animal agriculture also leads to the chances of future pandemics, which we just seen recently that happened 3 years ago and basically dragged along until right now. And by the way, Dr. Greger in the documentary actually predicted the which pandemic. I leave that quick scene here.
And caused the next human pandemic.
And if that wouldn't be enough, our food choices also shorten our lives and speed up global warming. So really not that cool. And on the other side, we have the incredible strong force of the status quo and the strong international dependence on animal farming on economic growth. And growth is really required for a country, as countries are like bicycle. For them to keep their balance, they have to keep moving and growing. So the solution that I propose, and if we think about the future, is actually quite similar to the documentary the solution that the documentary indirectly proposes. And that is a gradual and consistent switch to plant-based meat and dairy alternatives. So here's my future prediction. I predict that in the next 10 to 20 years, in developed countries, we see a gradual and then a rapid shift to plant-based alternatives. That prediction is based on the plant-based alternatives gaining increased market share right now, alternatives such as dairy decreasing their market share, and the increasing transition to artificial intelligence. Because a big factor of the GDP that animal agriculture provides is that they employ a lot of people. And if less people are needed to do basic tasks, which we will see in the future due to artificial intelligence, this again decreases the strength of animal agriculture when it comes to the benefit of a country. So the incentives are less there to preserve the status quo. That's what I think will happen in the next 10 to 20 years in developed countries. For countries that are in a different stage of growth, such as India and China, this will likely take a bit longer as they are in a different phase, right? But I personally do believe that the chance is significant that we see a plant-based world within our lifetime. So if you like this video, don't forget to smash the like button. If you want to see more videos like this, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And if you want to get coached by me, help vegans get in the best shape of their life, quickly and sustainably, if you're looking to learn more about that, then you can click the link in the description where you can schedule a free call with yours truly. So see you in the next video or talk to you soon.